So I think we'll go ahead and get started. And looks like we have enough seats, and we'll have a few more, I think, come along. But it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the spring semester of our Innovation Catalyst Seminar Series. And my name is Maria Emanuel. I'm the Senior Licensing Manager of UNHInnovation. You may have known us formerly as the Office for Research Partnerships and Commercialization. So now our title fits onto a business card comfortably. And you'll be hearing more about us as the months go along. Our theme this year for the seminar series has been Lean Startup Business Tactics. And you may remember from the fall we've talked about identifying your minimal viable product and finding your customer, part of customer development. So today we're going to talk about marketing to your defined market. And if you visit our website, and we'll also of course send out our email announcements, but for the rest of the semester we're going to come full circle on addressing these topics. And so upcoming we'll have who owns your company, startup infrastructure on a budget, and HR issues that you should probably be aware of as a startup company. And as a reminder, same format that we always have, which is we'll start with our presentation, which will be very interactive today, and we'll finish up with our networking session, which just immediately follows, starting at 5. We'll migrate these few steps over here and continue the conversations. And I think that's it for housekeeping items. I'm looking at Paige, who organizes us. Yes, okay. So with that, it's my pleasure today to introduce Catherine Blake, and our speaker. Catherine is the founder of Sales Protocol International, and she has professional experience unbelievably spanning 20-some years, and really works with a lot of different entities, from Fortune 500 companies to nonprofits. I was looking at your bio, and it included working here with our undergraduate students at UNH in various capacities. I see some nodding their heads. And interestingly, it's not only locally, but across many continents, maybe all except for Antarctica. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll see where you are next year. Maybe we'll get a postcard with some penguins on them. And so really looking at strategic initiatives, how to grow companies, how to execute on ideas, how to use old-fashioned elbow grease as part of this, and with it, an underlying passion for sales, marketing, and business development. So I've had the pleasure of working with Catherine when I had my tenure with the New Hampshire Biomedical Council for about 6 years, and she now uses her expertise and works on the board of directors for the New Hampshire High Tech Council. So really a keen interest in developing this infrastructure and networking across the state where we can come together to have these kinds of conversations. And so we really appreciate you coming today. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
So today we are going to climb Mount Everest, right? This is the polar vortex, right? Right, we're living and breathing it. Come on right on down here in the front row, TJ. TJ's been on Shark Tank, by the way. He's famous. Yeah, he's going to help me with my presentation. What year are you now, TJ?
I am a senior this year.
Senior this year? That's right. Yeah, he's amazing. So you'll get to meet him later. We have a celebrity with us in the house. All right, so today, in honor of the polar vortex, we're going to climb Mount Everest together. Are you ready? Yes, I'm ready. I can't wait. I'm not cold enough. Okay, so with this, I thought about you as an audience, and I thought about what you might be interested in, and the assumption is that you are starting companies, we're incubating companies. So there's always a challenge there because you've got to get traction. And it's really tricky because at first I know most of you that I've talked to, it's like we want to boil the ocean. We want everybody to start using this product. Well, you know what? You have to start somewhere. So let's talk strategy for a second. This has been around for a long time. I know Lisa and some of us, have read this material and studied this material. Crossing the Chasm by Geoffrey Moore. This is your mountain, right? There's Everest right there on a diagram. So let me break this down for you, because this is something you're going to be able to get your heads wrapped around in terms of how do I get traction and how do I get this going. So in the beginning, while you're developing your business plan, you are over here with the 2.5%. These are the innovators. All right, these are people like you. You are the ones coming up with the next big thing, right? You've got to find other innovators and early adopters that can get their heads wrapped around what you're bringing to market because they're the ones that you're going to be able to get on board with you early on, okay? Now, can you think of who you might be targeting that are early adopters or the early adopters and other innovators with a new product or service? What sort of title are you going after? Anybody? Begins with a C. All right, so other entrepreneurs. I personally love chief scientists and chief technical officers, CTOs and chief scientists. The reason why is they're in the crow's nest. They are thinking big picture, and they're the ones that their job is to figure out what's on the horizon. So oftentimes you can sit down with them with a new product or service, and they're going to be thinking way beyond what you have come up with, your invention or idea. So you want to try to connect with those people, find their tribes, find where they congregate, and try to bring your idea to them to see what they think they can do with it. Now, with that, you've got, and these are, by the way, your alpha testers, your beta testers, and these might also be the people that you could potentially get an exclusive agreement with. So you may be able to, if you have something that's truly viable, bake that concept into what they're building and release it to market. An example of this was just this morning, I had the privilege of hearing the CEO of Wilcox, which is a firearms manufacturer here in Portsmouth that is manufacturing optics for our special forces in the military. They are also producing certain weaponry that's using lasers and so forth, very, very, very leading edge stuff. So they're talking to the huge defense contractors on how they can take their technology, because they can move on a dime and bake it into other systems that are used by the military. Okay, so they may be a component of a larger military type application. So do you see how this works? They can go in and find the right player and get on that bandwagon. Now, you've got this thing called the chasm, and we're going to talk about the chasm more in a second. This is where you've got to take that leap, and the reason why it's a chasm is you may get these very enthusiastic people that get it, they're on board, they love it, but now they have to now sell it either upstream within their organization to then go for sort of the bigger deal and bring it to market, or you might have to actually bring it to a broader market. So the chasm is tricky, and we'll talk about ways to get across that. Then you've got the early majority. These are people that have heard about it, read about it. They want to kind of get on board with something that's new. And then the late majority. And in the middle there, you've got something called the tornado, right? Right where that line is in the center is the tornado. And when you're inside the tornado, that's the place where, you know, everybody's like, you don't almost have to sell it. It's selling itself. And with products that are inside the tornado, what happens is they almost don't need a human. I know this is kind of a weird concept, but let me explain it. When you go into a supermarket, for example, there is a person that is checking you through the line. Now, for a lot of us, we want to get in and get out, and we don't necessarily care about the relationship with that individual, right? So we go to the self-scan line, right? I don't need a relationship. I need to get in and get out. The relationship doesn't add value, right? So that's sort of the inside the tornado, where things you can sell over the internet. It's an Amazon.com. It's something that, you know, a Zappos, where you don't really need the human interaction. The product just flies off the shelves. And then late majority, these are the people that, you know, once the fad is kind of over, they decide to get on the bandwagon, and the laggards are the ones that it's already gone out of style, and now they're, you know, wearing platform shoes now 20 years later. Okay, so this is sort of the life cycle, and where a lot of people, again, in my experience, have an issue is they want to just jump up to the top of the mountain. They don't realize that it's a climb, and they're really not sure how to get there. But they want to kind of hit the whole market without sort of bringing it down into segments and going deep. So let's take a look at that. All right, so here is one plan for climbing Mount Everest. As you can see, there are different camps and different segments for planning this journey. Is anyone a mountain climber, by the way? No? Okay, I was hoping we'd have one in the room, but oh well. Okay, so so back to kind of the rules here. First is understand the terrain. Understand the terrain before you even invest too much. Figure out what it is you're going after, all right? Quick story, I had a gentleman who approached me with an invention. It was a type of curvilinear gear that was very interesting. It was actually originally designed by Leonardo da Vinci, and he took it, he looked at these drawings, and he figured out how to adapt it, and he had the physics worked out, but he wasn't sure how to bring it to market. So, you know, we looked at it, and he had in his mind it was going to be a certain size, and I said, well, you know, it might be that this is a medical application. It could be scaled way down and beyond a robotic arm operating on a patient, you know, inside the human body, where it has to move in certain angles in certain directions. And so he hadn't even thought of that, you see. So he was getting ready to bring on investors to develop a prototype where there really wasn't a market. So I'm sitting here thinking he's going to burn through all this time and money when he really hasn't figured out what the applications are and where there's a need. It's like, well, I've built this, they will come, right? We need to figure it out. So understand the terrain. The next part really is to plan for the unexpected. You never know who you're going to meet on the mountain. So this step is really about the business plan and about the fact that you really have to map it out on paper, you know, before you, and by the way, mapping out on paper will also help you get your mind around what else is out there, who we're going after. And I find in the process of writing it that you actually start to develop new ideas. There's something that happens in the human mind when you start to map it out on paper. I think I've written about 5 or 6 business plans. The last one I did was about 250 pages, and a lot of that was supplementary research that we did to try to figure out. We were trying to bring a product from India to the United States. It was a lighting product that would light up all the street lamps, they're called Cobras, on a highway. So we could basically light up 95 down the eastern seaboard, all from a control panel through the internet. And we were trying to figure out how to adopt that and what the Department of Transportation, you know, how they would change over, what technology would be needed, what happens if it's a polar vortex and the components freeze. I mean, we were going through all this on paper and trying to figure this out. So, and we found some issues, and the issues we figured out it may or may not make sense to try to bring this product into the US and then adapt it, okay? And when we approached investors, they weren't, because of this Mount Everest that we'd have to scale, they weren't sure that they were interested. So that's why the mapping out on paper is huge. The other thing that we found is developing an advisory board early is a great idea, because you want to have people, trusted advisors you can bounce this off of. And I know for a lot of you know this, so you might just be hearing it now in stereo, which never hurts. But the thing about an advisory board, these are not paid directors. These are people that care about your success. They're going to be brutally honest with you about whether or not what you've come up with is really going to fly. Because your friends and family typically love you and care, and they don't want to hurt your feelings. But this advisory board are people that are going to tell you the truth and really lay down, you know, the challenges in front of you in a truthful manner. Share with early adopters. So at that point, once you've kind of got this somewhat figured out and you've got it to where you can at least sit down and explain it to somebody quickly, see if somebody is willing to invest their time. If what you've come up with is, if an early adopter, you know, real innovation type, is not seeing the potential and they're not willing to maybe test it or try it or invest their time, whether or not it's money, it might just be time, in reporting back to you, then that's a red flag. Sometimes it makes sense to move on. You may have the wrong person. They might just be too busy, but if they see the potential, they're going to carve out the time. That's always key in what their response is and how they react. Make sure you've got a contract with teeth in it. Definitely and I'm sure you've discovered this with your invention, but it's the non-disclosure agreements. I actually had a product idea stolen from me. I showed it to a friend. I had a prototype. She reproduced it. I went over to her home and I saw it. It just sort of was left out there, and she was off and running. Shame on me for sharing the idea with a friend without, coming up with some type of agreement. And it was a lesson for me, and it ended up in a national catalog. I was like, oh. So, and then the alpha beta OEM model. I just had this conversation last week. I spoke at a women's conference a week ago, and there was a woman there that had this great invention, and it's a product that you wear for women and so on and so forth. I won't go into much more detail because she's in development. But I talked to her about sort of, and I'm going to use the OEM model with her invention. I'm like, have you thought about going and talking to some of these national brands? They've already got retail, they're already marketing under different labels and in big box stores. No, I want to brand it myself. It has to have my brand. Now, this is somebody who's never done anything with manufacturing. They've never run a company. I mean, I get that. I love her passion and so forth, but unless she's got really the funding and the traction to move this ahead, she'd be better off taking her great idea and pitching it to somebody else, and then figuring out a way to get the royalties from that. So you've got to think in those different mindsets, and not be too worried about having pride and it's got to have my name on it, okay? Because sometimes it's cha-ching, it can cha-ching, cha-ching. This could be baked into something else. This could be the intel inside, and you're just getting a check every month. So, all right. So here's the chasm. So on Mount Everest, apparently there are lots of these crevices. And believe it or not, they have these permanent ladders set up. Now, you have to remember, these people are wearing long ice teeth strapped on their shoes, and they're walking across a ladder. Can you imagine? And if you fall, I mean, that's it. They don't rescue you. You're thousands of feet down. So this is the chasm that we have to, as entrepreneurs, we've got to get across this thing. And so how do we do it? One of the ways that we do that is to figure out what these vertical niche markets are. So back to the gear I mentioned before, well, the medical field was off this gentleman's radar completely. So let's go talk to some surgeons. Let's figure out, is there something like this? Does this solve a problem? Or are we a hammer looking for a nail? Or are we a nail looking for a hammer? So let's figure this out. And so that would be an example of a niche market. I happen to be taking a plant tour of Goss International, and which is now, is it still Goss? I know they were bought by the Chinese. I can't keep up. Anyway, it was Heidelberg, then it became Goss. So I'm walking through their plant, and I'm looking at, I took a manufacturing plant tour, and I'm looking at some of the equipment, and they had this gear, this arm that was swinging around. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks very much like what this gentleman invented on a much larger scale. Maybe it has limitations. Maybe it can't move 360. So you needed to go talk to the manufacturer of this equipment to figure out, do you see? And the whole newspaper manufacturing was completely off his radar. So it's finding these very niche, deep markets. And if you can get in there and solve this, you own it, okay? So getting that sorted out. Is it a killer app? You know, is it something that no one else has? Does it solve a problem? Sometimes what you've come up with is a better mousetrap than what's being used today. And if it's cheaper, faster, better, if it, you know, kind of goes with Moore's law, which is 25%, you know, better in every aspect, then you've just innovated, you've brought it to the next level. Earlier this week, I had the privilege of touring NanoComp, which takes carbon nanotubes and they, through a patented manufacturing process, turn it into a material that can be used on the skins of aircraft, again, inside of military, the soldiers on the field. It has fire prevention capabilities. It can conduct heat and electricity, and also conduct what normal copper would conduct through a cabling system. So it's about a fraction, it's like 1/1000th of the width of a copper cable in some cases, providing the same at a fraction of the cost. So innovations like that are killer apps. When you put that for NASA to put that on some type of spacecraft where you're using less fuel, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You could figure it out on paper, what they're saving in fuel alone. So a lot of times it's figuring out, is it, you know, are you saving? Maybe the killer app is you're saving money. Whole product. This is the concept of thinking about, you know, thinking holistically. We might be Intel Inside. We might be that niche app that's part of the overall solution. We may not be the only thing. So again, that's you know, you just have to kind of, through these conversations, figure that out. First mover advantage would be something like a Google Glass is a great example. Okay, they have first mover advantage. Why? No one else has it, right? I wish Josh Sear were here, because he comes to these meetings and he's got a pair of the Google Glass. They're great. And now Google's come up with a contact lens that will actually sense for diabetics. The eye releases pressure and is it oxygen, I think? The contact lens has a sensor on it, and they're doing some testing with this now. And so these are the types of inventions or innovations that, you know, no one else has even thought of. So they've got first mover advantage. Now, you might be a me too. It's the Coke and Pepsi. If you do it better, if you can do it at a lower cost, you might actually leapfrog. But you've got to figure that out. And then being baked in as a de facto standard and developing a strong reference base. So these are all the tactics that you can use to get across that chasm. It's really about...
What's a strong reference base? Are you going to get back to it?
Strong reference base, yes. Strong reference base is you have found a few niche applications, and now you can use that to then go talk to maybe the larger company to get now into more of a mass market. Does that make sense? Because you might come up with something that's going to help a smaller company. They might have a very small market share, but now if you've got a product, you've shown revenue, you've shown traction, you can then go to investors, get a larger, you know, get that next round, for example, and then bring it into bigger companies, a bigger client base, if that makes sense. But that's hard to do when you have no business. Do you follow?
Yep, so two kinds of references, a reference to future customers or a reference to investors. Is this what you were saying?
Oh, I was referring to customers. So you wanna, one of the things that it's always a challenge for early stage companies is show revenue early and often. Okay, you've probably heard that 100 times. Show revenue early and often. So you want to be able to get some customers on board, start to deploy, and then be able to use them as a reference to go to the next one. Once you have that base, then you can go to like the larger client base, client pool, if you will, or even cross verticals. So value proposition, you know, why should I buy from you? This is tricky. I think sometimes early stage companies, they're like, but we haven't sold anything to anyone. How do we explain this? Well, sometimes what they're buying is belief in you as the leader and your track record and your resume and the fact that if they go with you, they're going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. So they're going to take a leap of faith with you to try this new innovation. Facts and stats. This is really just, you know, how you tell your story. How did you arrive upon this idea? How is it, you know, for a lot of innovations, it came as a mistake. Well, we were trying to develop this and we ended up with this, and then we figured out there was a use for this. Post-it notes, great example. It was a type of glue they were using for something else, and they figured out, oh, it can stick paper to a wall, great. Now let's figure out how people would use this. So tell the story, and then how would, you know, build that vision around how they would use this. So if you've come up with something and they can't get their head wrapped around how they would use it, you almost have to think through it for them. One defense contractor said that they actually, and I know they're in a different position because they're well established and they've been out there for a decade or so. They actually said they would do R&D for a client. The client, they would say, bring us your challenge, we'll do the R&D, we'll come back to you, and you know, if you're interested, then we want an exclusive deal with you. By the time they placed their first order, they worked the pricing model so that they paid for all the R&D, all right, on that initial first deal. So sometimes you have to give a little bit to get to land the whale or the elephant, but it's sometimes you have to do the thinking for them and build the vision. So, and then once you get rolling, then you can kind of figure out what are your campaigns. Vertical markets. What vertical market are we going after? We're going after medical. Who are we going to talk to? Well, we need to talk to the doctors. Do we need to talk to the doctors in the medical facilities? Do we need to talk to PhDs, researchers at universities? You know, who is my target? Both on the vertical industry and then the horizontal, sort of the title. And once you do that, it becomes kind of a crosshair. And once you have that crosshair, you can go deep. You can figure out what professional organizations they belong to. What are they reading? You can develop the media list. You can figure out where those professional organizations are. Where are their trade shows? How can I publish this information, send them a press release, get the word out? You know, then it just almost becomes a textbook academic exercise, and it's easy. You just have to, you know, it's some heavy lifting, it's some guerrilla marketing. And then consortiums. You know, sometimes there are groups that come together buying consortiums. How do we get on that bandwagon? Speaking, talking about your innovation, getting this on people's radar is always a great way to gain traction. The flywheel. I love the notion of the flywheel. This is Jim Collins. We give him credit. The flywheel is really about, and this is the secret of marketing. There is no secret. It's a lot of hard work. You've got to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And if you do those things, you will get traction. All right? So part of the challenge is to figure out, what do I need to be doing? Am I in the right markets? Am I talking to the right people? Am I getting traction? But then it's iterative. Over and over and over. And the great thing about a flywheel is, if you are a physicist and you can understand the equation at the bottom, what it means is it gets easier, right? Building the framework for growth is the toughest part. You know, you've got to have the prospect database. I recommend people get on a platform as early as possible, get on Salesforce.com, start to serial network yourself on LinkedIn, figure out who those verticals are, start to put them into that database so that when you're going to reach out, you know, you have it. You can just hit a button and blast something out to a vertical market or a industry group. And it becomes easier as you roll. You've already built this infrastructure. So, and then pick your team. Very important. It's all about the team. So here's an example of a climber. He is with it's an Australian climbing group. They climbed Mount Everest. They are wounded warriors, and they made it up and back, the team. This is the Special Forces team that went into combat together. And as you can see, this gentleman lost his arm, but he strapped on it's a combination ice pick and saw. So if you're climbing Mount Everest and this man has this as his other hand, you'd want him on your team, right? He has an advantage. And they were successful. So it's important to pick your team and make sure that, you know, I can't say enough about team, but make sure that their values are aligned with your values. I came through the many startup situations and watched a lot of people that would get on this bandwagon because they wanted to it was like a get rich quick. I want to get rich quick. I'm going to join a startup. And the startup would dangle, oh, we're gonna do an IPO, and you're gonna, you know, and this was an era where the administrative assistants were buying homes based on, you know, when the company went public, everyone got loads of money and they were going out and buying homes, you know, the next day. I mean, it was crazy. Well, so you might have that mentality, or you might have the mentality that, you know what, I want to bring a really great product to market. I want to hang on to this company and I want to keep it private for as long as possible. And then we want to maybe get bought. But you know, whatever the strategy is, it's about making sure that the team is aligned and that you're all, particularly if you have partners, that you're all on the same page. So having those conversations, those difficult conversations, is important, particularly at the partner level. And in terms of the team level, really setting expectations and making sure everyone is very clear on what they're getting themselves into. You might want to bring on a few guys like this, you know, this guy's hanging on the side of a cliff. They do it. All right, iterative approach. So I did have the privilege of hearing a woman who climbed Mount Everest at a leadership conference last summer, and she talked about how when you climb at a certain altitude, you can really only move about like this, and you're breathing about 10 breaths before you even move your foot, your other foot. So imagine climbing at that slow rate, and your brain, you know, the oxygen, you're having all kinds of issues with the air, the thin air, and so forth. What she said, what kept her going, was to iterate. She said, I was iterative. And it was like, okay, what do you mean by that? She said, well, I would look at the rock and just say, you know, if I can just get to that rock, I'm going to be okay. So she would get herself as far as the rock. And then she would look and she'd say, okay, I need to get to the ladder. Right? And she'd get to the ladder. I need to get across the ladder. And then I need to get to that big chunk of ice over there. And that's how she did it. She didn't think about, I mean, she knew her long-term goal was to climb, was to get to the summit and come back down. But along the way, it was iterative. And she kept checking to make sure she was okay the whole way. So as you go, you want to make sure that you are being mindful, and here's a photo of that, what that looks like, the iterative process when you're up there. And with that, there's the notion of Kaizen. Some of you, any black belts, any Six Sigma or Lean black belts in the room? I'm sure some of you have been through this. Continuous improvement, this is Kaizen. There's the Japanese character for it. And it's really about continuous improvement and looking to achieve excellence. And they have a very basic model, which is plan, do, check, and act. So it's the idea that you've got to continuously measure how you're doing and go back and reiterate until you work the bugs out. But it's really thinking about, you know, how do we create a well-oiled machine, and how do we deliver excellence for each step. And it's not just on the product innovation, it might be on running the business. There's lean principles that go into running the back office, managing the administrative side of a business, and on a shop floor or in software. You know, how are we managing bugs? How are we reporting? If we're delivering software and we've got an alpha site or a beta site, how are we documenting the fixes that need to be made? And then what's our process for going back and testing and making sure and getting feedback every step of the way? So, Kaizen, and then bringing the right tools along the way. Certainly you wouldn't climb a mountain that's going to take you a long time and be very, you know, it's going to be an exhaustive process without having the right tools with you. So some of the tools that you want, you know, as a baseline is some type of, I say cloud-based CRM, because the contacts is really your war chest. The prospects and people you're going to go after, you're going to need media, you're going to need thought leaders, you're going to need the people that are your early adopters, you're going to need the ones that you want to talk to later on. So having, as you go through this iteratively, you're adding them into this platform is great. And then personally, I like cloud-based because then you can have people working virtually and helping you develop this. The value proposition, making sure that you have that, but then you can tweak that for your vertical industries. Inbound and outbound marketing. Inbound marketing, now we've got all kinds of technology to get us there. And there's even an inbound for those of you who really want to go deep into inbound. There's a conference that a bunch of us go to every year down in Boston. Last year I was there with 5,000 of my new best friends, and people flew in from all over the country. So there's one in Boston and there's one in Silicon Valley. And it's a great place to learn the tools and to really get do a deep dive into inbound marketing. That conference is sponsored by HubSpot, who many of you have heard of, but the different presenters get into the different technologies available. And then really developing thought leadership to start to be known as the thought leader, the company or the individual. That is, again, depth. The deeper you go, initially, the more traction you're going to have, because you then become the thought leader and the expert, and starting to get the word out there through, you know, becoming published, or at least getting an editorial and establishing a brand. Now, here's a trend that I would say, you know, maybe 5 years ago, or maybe we go back a little further. This wasn't really as much of a challenge for people as it is now. Not only are you developing a brand for your company or organization, but you're developing a personal brand. This is a game changer because you've got to work on both. Interestingly, these are sort of unbundled now. Fortune did an article about this about 1.5 years ago, and they talked about how these big companies are challenged by, they're like, our employees are all so well branded that they're becoming rock stars and people care more about wanting to meet with them because of who they are than their logo they're representing. That's a good thing, right? You want to hang on to those people. That may be you. You may be the innovator or the leader, but it is important to do both and to focus on both. So let's talk about, let me introduce you to, this is Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur, and they wrote together this book called The Business Model Generation. This is a book that comes highly recommended by UNH's innovation group, and this gentleman here is a thought leader, and we're going to dive in for a second to some of his material. Here's what he says. He says, we have to approach our business like a surgeon. And he's Swiss, so they like knives, all right? Anyway, so approach it like a surgeon. And when I think of a surgeon, let's hope They're going to be very precise. They're highly trained. They've done their research and they know exactly what they're doing. They don't just go and, hey, let's open them up, right? I mean, they know. There's a lot of conversations, there's x-rays. They know what they're doing before they go in. So in this business model, here is how he lays it out. This is his model, and this is great for entrepreneurs. So you've got key activities, key partners. You know, who do we need to align with? What are the things we need to do? And this is the part, this is where it gets, I mean, you can literally get caught up in chasing your tail and not getting anything done. Having a process around where you're taking your business is going to be hugely helpful. So this model will help you lay this out. What are the activities we need to do? You might have a list of 100 activities and go, you know what, there's no way. We don't have the resource, we don't have the time. Some of these things are going to have to fall off the list. So sometimes it might take a facilitator to kind of go through this, or, you know, if you can, or one of you might be a facilitator for your own group. Then you have to figure out what are the costs, key resources. What do we absolutely have to have? What is this going to cost us? What is our value proposition? Developing those customer relationships, and then channels and revenue. Because again, it may not be a direct model. You may be selling through someone. You might be baked into something, or you might say, you know what, we're gonna sell the concept. We want a royalty type deal. We want an OEM deal. We don't care if our brand name's on it. Put your brand name on it. I don't care as long as I'm getting the revenue. All right. So these are all the things you have to figure out. Now, how can I benefit from this? Well, here's a photograph of a company that went through this process. And as you can see, this was a facilitated discussion. It looks nice and neat. They probably did that because they were going to take a picture of it. The person's handwriting is perfect. But the point is that there are templates online for this, and you can download this template and take yourselves through. Now, I'm not suggesting this is your business plan. This may be an exercise you go through before you lay out the business plan. But this is going to be very helpful in terms of downloading with your advisory board or your team, you know, how are we going to go after this? And part of this process is going to mean that not only do you put the ideas and the concepts up there, but then you're going to go through a priority. You're going to actually prioritize these notes, these sticky notes and things that you put up there to figure out what we're going to keep and what's going to fall off the board. Okay? And then here is an example of actually it laid out. Then you can then lay it out on paper, more or less. And this is great. This is Groupon's model, okay, when Groupon was behaving, okay? And so, for example, key partners. Facebook, key partner. PayPal, Amex, Target. I wonder what they think about Target now. No, but Target, GameStop, etc. So they figured out their key partners, key activities. We've got to have, and by the way, this company is into gaming. I'm sorry. This is. I apologize. This is Zynga. Okay, sorry, I switched them at the last minute. This is Zynga. So they make Farmville. They make these games online. All right. So their key activities: game creation process, customer support, and maintaining existing games. Now, one thing you may or may not know about gamification right now is it's probably one of the hottest areas for marketeers. So people that are making these online games for fun, brands are wanting to be baked into them. So for example, Dunkin' Donuts has a campaign now where in one of these games, you can go to the donut shop and there's a person throwing sprinkles in the air and she'll give you a donut, all right, and then you go on your way inside this game. They pay for that privilege. And gaming, the amount of revenue games are generating is in the, I mean, it's a millions, multi-million-dollar industry right now. So very interesting. They have figured out how to monetize it, believe it or not. So this is also trending. Value propositions, it's free to play, it's mindless entertainment, it's social interaction, customer relationships, support from Zynga, Zynga's Facebook page, and then segments, casual gamers and advertisers. So they've really, through this process, were able to focus and figure out who exactly they're going after and how they're going to do that. So in this template are some key questions that will help guide you. So the questions you can start to answer as you put up these concepts. All right, so this is Steve Blank. He's another thought leader. He's out of Silicon Valley, and he has an extensive resume. He came out of one of the companies he worked for was Pixar, which was a Steve Jobs company, and Disney. And they did, of course, animation amongst other things. He's developed this book with Bob Dorff called the Startup Owner's Manual. And he has a model that he likes to use, which is interesting. There are sort of 4 categorical areas, and between customer discovery and customer validation, there's something called a pivot. Well, a pivot is what we talked about earlier. It's that flywheel. The pivot means test market, get feedback. Test market, get feedback. Test, get feedback. Test, get feedback. Before you're ready to really launch this, to sort of go across that chasm with the product, you've got to go through this iterative process to make sure that what you have is, truly going to stick. All right. And then customer creation, that's the execution part, scale, execution, and then company building. So there are these processes in those first 2 steps, which I would say are going to happen early on with those early adopters. Problem, solution, fit. Proposed market value proposition. Proposed funnel. And then business model, sales and marketing roadmap. And at the same time, you're doing this pivot, you're testing. Here's another view of this broken down. This is where you actually, another look at the same material, where you're now breaking it down into bits and you're expanding on those concepts. So I wanted to introduce you to these tools to say that these are real models that you can use. There's a lot of information out there. You can buy the book, you can look at the templates online, and bring yourselves through these models to start to make sure that you're on track and you're staying on track and you're focused. And then go out and meet with Dr. Evil, okay? What Steve Blank tells you is you have to get out of the house. Go talk to customers. Get out there, find out what they're thinking. Don't stay in the ivory tower, all right? The great thing about Dr. Evil is he looks scary, but he really isn't. No, Dr. Evil is, the point is that you're going to get some tough feedback, sometimes criticism. A couple of entrepreneurs I've spoken to have said that the criticism, conductive criticism, they've gotten, it's not personal, it's, here's what you need to do better, this is not working, I don't like this feature, actually made them a better company and made their product or service better. These are the people that are going to help you through their feedback, and that's where you start to ratchet up the process and what you're coming out with. And sometimes the people you're working with come up with a brilliant idea that you didn't even think of, and this may be the 3rd or 4th rev of it. So, to recap, understand the terrain, plan, pick your team, iterative, and then bring the right tools with you for the climb. So, with that, you can climb Mount Everest. And I have great news for you. So you go up, right? You hit the summit, you do another selfie, right? Remember the selfie, we practiced it here. And, and then you go back down, which can be as challenging. And then what? You gotta find another big thing to do. What's next? All right, so I'm actually done at this point. I'll open it up to questions. Thank you for your attention. And so let's have a conversation. Anyone? Thoughts, ideas? Let's see how we're doing on time.
Oh, you're right on time.
Oh my gosh.
To the minute.
To the moment. Okay.
Do you have any questions, or is it thinking about the interests or experiences that brought you here tonight and how this might relate specifically to the example that you're addressing?
What is Salesforce.com?
Okay.
I think you mentioned that earlier in the value-driven campaigns.
Yeah, so Salesforce.com is simply, it's a cloud-based, meaning all you need is a web browser. They have a symbol, no software. I love it. So it's nothing you have to load on your computer platform or your server. It's in the cloud. You pay a monthly license fee for users. And it gives you, there's a couple of, you can start as small as I just want a contact manager. I want a place to put all my business cards and then my prospects that I'm finding electronically. And I want to load them into this database. And what I love about it is that it's relational, so that you can slice it and dice it a number of different ways. For example, you can take a bunch of information. I've got probably over 10,000 contacts in my database as a small company. I've got them by vertical industry. I have them by title, so I can slice. I want all VPs, I want all CEOs, I want everyone in biomedical, I want everyone in medical device. I can pull reports, I want just women. You know, if there's a women's conference, I might just pull a report for women, just women only. So I can set up these fields, I can create custom fields, and that way you can slice up this information and push out campaigns. Does that make sense? It also works on the lead capture side. Furthermore, once you get into the sales cycle, you can develop the sales funnel. So all the sales activity that you have, all the efforts, you can attach documents and so forth, and you can put that in. And then there are apps that they have APIs, so you can click into some other applications. There's like hundreds of business partners. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a list of 10,000 customers, right? Excel and, Google spreadsheets works fine to start with. I mean, for me, my last list isn't really that big, and that is the plan.
Yep.
For now, spreadsheets work great. So if you feel like this is not quite there yet, there's good. Anything that tabulates data this way and that way is a great place to start.
Yeah, that's good. They do have, for $15 a month, they actually peeled off this new service, just contacts, which is really reasonable. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I have a question. Can you go back to your first slide real quick?
I would be delighted. For you, TJ, of course. Anything. Okay. So that one.
Yeah. No. There you go. Okay.
You like that one. Yeah. He'll do it. I swear, he will climb Mount Everest. This man can do anything. Okay, here we go.
Well, I was supposed, this is sort of a picture of users and sort of, the mountain of his customers. How does the sales costs sort of associate with this graph? Is it a similar shape graph? Is it more up front? Is it later? How does sort of as you pass through these different steps, how does your cost structure for sales and marketing?
Okay, so first of all, this diagram closely relates to the product development cycle, just so you know. So here's what happens is there are all these other curves and valleys that we can overlay on top of this, because it depends on how much you want to expand your marketplace. All right, if you decide with Smartwheel that you're going to, can I say it? Was I allowed to? Okay. So if you decide with Smartwheel that you're going to OEM that to Daimler, Chrysler, or whomever, then at that point, you're not investing to the mass market. They are. Right. Do you follow?
I do.
All right, so that's where that, if you hang on to it, no pun, right. Then you have to understand his product. It's about holding onto a steering wheel. It's awesome. He should be a speaker. Yeah. But if you decide we're bringing this to market under the Inventioneers, then yes, you're going to need, that's going to scale with what you're going to need to hit the mass market, the consumer market. Okay. All right. Other questions? Yes.
So a lot of this is kind of talked about, like if you're stage 0, ground zero, bringing something up. If you're at a point where you've already got, your products, your services, and stuff like that. And you're more in like the marketing, expanding market, growing customer, like or market penetration. What are some suggestions you have for how to actually evaluate more of like an ROI on like your marketing that you're doing or your outreach that you're doing? Like you're up and running.
Right.
You want to be able to evaluate, is what I'm doing as successful as it could be, so you can actually kind of come back on that measure act part.
Right. So part of that's going to be
Short of just sales revenue.
right. Well, and that's where you have to actually look at your budget. How much are we spending on marketing? Sort of figure out percentage-wise what you're spending on marketing versus your revenue. What I would encourage you to do is consider social media. Yes, we love social media, right? I heard it. I heard you. I heard you. It was in your head. I could hear it. But yeah, because social media, at the end of the day, I mean, do we pay for it? Unless you're going to do a paid ad, it's great. It's a great way to get the message out and the word out because most of these tools are free. So that's one that I would encourage all of you to leverage. And some of you are going to be like, I don't know, that's not my thing. So find a way to do it. I mean, if Northrop Grumman has a Facebook page, I think we can figure it out, right? So there are ways of leveraging some of those platforms. But I would say, maybe bring somebody in to take a look, a second set of eyes to figure out maybe where there can be some new markets or some things you need to stop doing. I mean, oftentimes as a consultant, somebody will bring me in and I'll say, well, you are throwing your money away on this. Like, don't do this. Don't do this anymore. Focus on this and just keep doing this. So sometimes it's just a matter of, figuring that piece out, and also where you want to take your business. Are you trying to double it, or are you trying to, so these are rhetorical questions, but that's where you start to figure out the ROI.
Okay.
I hope that helps. Yeah.
A couple of ideas, yeah.
Okay, great. All right, what else? TJ?
You're talking about social media.
Yes.
It seems like every week you hear about this new social media site that's coming up and coming online. What are obviously Facebook and Twitter are the top ones, but beyond that, are there any other social media sites out there that's worth spending your time on as you're marketing with your company?
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
For like B2B, LinkedIn is really great.
I agree.
The data dives that you can do to find the right people to target, there's nobody else does. LinkedIn, Facebook can't really do that, or won't. Twitter can't do that, or won't.
If you're going to spend money on something, pay for a professional LinkedIn account so you can actually like search profiles and it'll let you actually pull data out of the system and send targeted email links. If you are in a tech field, like a technology field, the great thing about, in my opinion, and I've heard this from others in the industry, Facebook and Twitter, especially Facebook, is great if you're trying to market to a 20-something-year-old audience. If your target audience is the retired age people, why are you on Facebook if they're not?
It's changing. Facebook's 40, Instagram's going to be 20.
Break it up. Okay. There's a fight starting. I can tell.
Be aware of what you're using to reach what market, basically, right? And don't throw all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
On that.
Check out an app called Turnlight too. It's really good one.
What is it called?
Turnlight.
Right.
It's a advice-based. It's very similar to LinkedIn, but it has more tools. So it's more mentor networking, connecting with the right people. They sell it to colleges right now, but there's some mentor-based piece of it on the web app as well that you would utilize. It's questions, get communities and stuff. So it's really good.
Okay.
There are also tools out there too, like Hootsuite and crap like that.
Yeah.
Manage the 50 social networks all from one portal.
Exactly. So here's my quick advice. Yes, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is your new best friend. Okay. You want to make sure your profile is fully populated so that you look like the rock star that I know you are, okay? And that includes a great photo. Photos are huge. In addition to that, now remember LinkedIn has a search engine. So all those keywords that are in your profile and how you market yourself on LinkedIn is how people are going to find you and vice versa. So LinkedIn is huge. Twitter, I would say, would be number 2. Twitter is, and LinkedIn and Twitter are integrated now. So you can post to LinkedIn and push it out to your Twitter account By the way, the two gentlemen I spoke about earlier are both on Twitter, and you can, and I retweeted their tweets this afternoon so that if you follow me, you'll be able to see that information pop up. Twitter, what I love about Twitter is it's sound bites. So you only have a certain number of characters. You can link off of Twitter to other places. But the beauty of it is you can put out, you can become a thought leader by curating information in your field of expertise and publishing it. You may or may not write it all, but if you're doing the research and you're curating, you become somebody that other people want to follow because you're coming up with mindful information that might be helpful to them. Facebook, I'm with you. I use it for business. I think it's fun. I connect. I sort of mix my business and my personal network together because I kind of feel like I'm who I am, you know, in the grocery store, at work. And I'm comfortable with that, and I publish things that I'm happy to share with people. I would say for a lot of, like, anybody in the consumer, if you're marketing to consumers, Facebook is great. Absolutely great. It's a must-have. You can build a really fun community around your company and your people. I would say in a B2B setting, I would put it, you know, as a lower priority and focus more on the LinkedIn and Twitter, and obviously your website and blogging is great. Only blog if you have something to blog about. Otherwise, no one cares. All right. Anything else? Any other questions?
Just a comment. It seems like there's an awful lot of content that you have to come up with. Is that not the case?
Content for?
For Facebook and blogging and social media.
Okay, so here's what, and I can see how it can be really overwhelming. So here's what I would say to you, is be authentic. Because as you're in this quest to either bring a product to market or to go about your business, you're going to find things that are interesting to you. If they're interesting to you, they're probably going to be interesting to people in your tribe. And so share it with them. All right? And if you just think of it that way, I've heard people say, oh, you have to do 10 minutes a day, and, you know, almost like you're going to the gym. Well, you know what? I would say unless you're a paid social media person, if you're an entrepreneur, just be authentic.
Is it worthwhile to pay somebody to be your social media person?
If they understand the message you want to push out there. If so, absolutely, unequivocally.
If you want to look at a company called scripted.com, they have a whole slew of professional writers, and they'll control your blog posts, they'll control any type of social media that
What's it called again?
Scripted.com.
Scripted.com.
It's another entrepreneur. I don't have a name, but it's another entrepreneur that I work with that he started it, and it's great content.
So you basically got a group of people to get together and become experts in this?
Well, what it is it's all professional writers, and they pick their favorite topics, and then what they do is they submit bids, and then the more popular writers are the more that the customers accept their writing, the higher up they go in the ranking, and so they get paid a little bit more. It's not a great economy for writers right now, so it allows them to leverage the fields that they want to stay in and get to write about what they're really passionate about, which then for the customer is awesome because they know the field that you're trying to speak to.
That's great. Good. But just be careful. Because I've heard some of these sites are people in offshore that they may not, English might be their second language, and they don't know the depth of the industry. So just be careful. Just, you know, go in with your eyes wide open. All right. Great. With that, back to Marie.
Keep talking.
Yes.
Over here, but first we're going to say thank you to Kat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. That's great. Thank you, Maria.
So hopefully we'll see you here in a month, and please continue to stay. Thank you.